I'm going to take you through the most common myofascial meridians and use this to create more connectivity in your body, especially during movement practice. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants with these. Most of this comes from Tom Myers and his Anatomy Trains system, also Joanne Avison, Jill Miller. There's a little bit of emotional anatomy and somatic releasing knowledge in here. Peter Levine, Bessel van der Kolk, even a little Gabor Mate. So the deep front line, this is your core, deep core, breathing core, bandha core, even Sushumna Nadi. It's often described as a tube, and Tom Myers will always emphasize that you need to see this in 3D with volume. It runs from the arches of your feet to the root of your tongue, and that corresponds perfectly with the yoga concept of the bandhas. And you have bandhas on the arches of your feet, soles of your feet, pada bandha, in the pelvic floor, mula bandha, respiratory diaphragm, uddiyana bandha, in your throat, jalandhara bandha, and then the tongue, jiva bandha. Also in your hands, hasta bandha. Points of interest in the deep front line include the arches of your feet, the inner thighs or the adductors, the pelvic floor, also known as the levator ani group, the psoas, iliacus, and the psoas weaves into the respiratory diaphragm. And then your pericardium, your heart sac, sits on top of the respiratory diaphragm, and that weaves into the deep neck flexors. And finally, your tongue and the floor of your mouth. The deep front line is the key to functional breathing, upright posture, and emotional regulation. Remember that how you breathe influences your nervous system. The inhale stimulates the phrenic nerve, the exhale is driven by the vagus nerve, and when you're collapsed or your breathing is dysregulated, it will influence your nervous system. Unfortunately, the deep front line is weak, offline, or disconnected for most of us because of chronic sitting, shallow breathing, and poor posture. When working with the deep front line, ask yourself, how does your body hold you from within? And then practice with these qualities, volume and echo. The lateral line coordinates movement side to side. The deep front line supports you from within. The superficial lines run front and back, and the lateral line runs up and down the sides of the body like struts, and they link left and right, top and bottom. When your lateral line is strong and supple, you're balanced. When it's weak or tight, you get wobbly, crooked, compensating. You get clunky with your walking. Points of interest on the lateral lines. You have the peroneals, your outer calves, the IT band and the tensor fascia lata, the glute medius and glute minimus, your obliques and intercostals, your serratus anterior, which are these fabulous feather-like muscles around your ribs, and the external muscles of your neck, like sternocleidomastoid and splenius. The lateral lines provide side-to-side stability and upright balance. You can think of them like the guardrails and the boundaries of your body. They're essential for walking, standing, single leg balance, lateral stepping, and also twisting. The lateral lines help you shift load during movement. Without it, you lean, you can hike one hip, you collapse or overcompensate, and dysfunction in the lateral line often leads to IT band pain, hip hiking, gripping in your lower back in the QL, shoulder lowering or elevating, and also emotional patterns like bracing, overreaching, carrying responsibility, being burdened will show up in the lateral lines. Question to ask yourself, are my seams even? Are the guardrails of my body consistent? Qualities to create here are tension and connection. The superficial back line is your back body support and tension system. It supports your upright posture and keeps you from collapsing forward. It runs from the soles of your feet up and over your forehead all the way to the eyebrows or your third eye. Points of interest include the plantar fascia, the bottom of your feet, your calves, the gastrocnemius more specifically, your hamstrings, the sacrotuberous ligament, so the ligament that runs on the side of your sacrum, it's very thick, very fibrous, the erector spinae, the muscles that run along your spine, and the thoracolumbar fascia, which is the space in between your lower ribs and the upper rim of your pelvis. also the occipital ridge and the connective tissue on your scalp, up and over the head, all the way to the eyebrows or your third eye space. The superficial back line stores and releases elastic energy. You can feel this with running, walking. It kind of pulls you back and then helps you spring forward. But in yoga asana practice, it is very obvious during back bends. Something like the standing back arch, you start to contract the back body as you go back and up, and then it'll propel you forward. The superficial back line is also like a bungee cord, in that it'll load on the way down and help you rebound on the way up. The deep front line influences the nervous system, whereas the superficial back line reflects the nervous system. The back body is where we store stuff. We armor up here or collapse to protect. For example, we can grip or clench in the back body, grip the shoulders or the jaw, grip the buttocks or the legs to appear strong, upright, and like we have it together. Or the back body can collapse and then we roll forward to protect the chest, the organs, our vulnerable front side. Releasing and softening the back body soothes the nervous system. And one of the best places to see and sense this is what we call in the ugly forward bend. With the superficial back line, ask, what is the quality of my back body? The qualities we want to generate through practice are spacious and supportive. The superficial front line is the front body support and tension system. It stabilizes posture from the front, and it's also how we present, how we show up in the world, our first impression. The superficial front line protects the belly, the chest, the throat. It controls flexion, that folding inward, containment, and emotional expression. Points of interest include the toe extensors, so the muscles on the tops of the feet, the shin, the tibialis anterior, quadriceps, rectus abdominis, the six-pack muscles running up the front of the abdomen, the sternal fascia, the connective tissue in the front of the chest, the 𝐟𝐨𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿, those jaw muscles again, and some of the muscles on the scalp that wrap around the back to what we call the occipital ridge. The superficial front line is profoundly affected by our modern lifestyle, especially the sitting and texting and driving we're all doing. We round forward and then we shorten and tighten and stiffen the superficial front line. This leads to tight hip flexors, a collapsed chest, and shallow breathing. We then thrust the ribs forward to appear upright, to have better posture, and this creates a whole conundrum in the back body. We also roll our head forward and jut our chin up and out. When well balanced, the superficial front line supports upright posture, but with an open chest and length in the front of the thighs, which leads to a spring in our step and our spine. Without a well-balanced superficial front line, we get the collapsed posture, forward head, gripping in the groins, and tightness across the chest that we're all too familiar with. And the superficial front line will reflect our emotional state. For example, when you're anxious, embarrassed, self-conscious, exhausted, you tend to collapse and curl inward. But when you're confident, joyful, expansive, expressive, you are open in the superficial front line. For the superficial front line, ask, what is my front body communicating? The qualities we want to cultivate during practice are open and receptive. The functional lines wrap across the body to maintain balance across all planes. These are lines of action, connection, and movement. The points of interest are the X-like connections on the front side of the body and the back side of the body. For example, on the front side, it would go from the right pec through the left oblique all the way down to the left inner thigh. On the back side, it would be the right latissimus dorsi through the thoracolumbar fascia to the left glute max. The functional lines transmit force and power across the midline, making full body movement feel powerful and connected rather than compartmentalized and clunky. If these lines are not quite firing, not quite connected, then force dissipates. So you lose power, and we tend to experience pain in like the lower back, instability in the shoulder, or just poor coordination with transitions. For the functional lines, ask, do I have power across my body? Create qualities like coherence and spiraling during practice. This is a big overview of these lines of connective tissue in the body. Use them, explore and experiment. You can do a whole practice and focus on just the lateral line or the deep front line or the superficial back line or the superficial front line or the functional lines. For the deep front line, breathing with circumference and core essentials. For the lateral line, poise and side body space. For the superficial back line, ugly forward bends and truth of your being. For the superficial front line, sacrum stabilizer and solar powered. For the functional lines, upper back ring and release and windmill practice.